last years of the 19th century, that human affairs were being watched from the timeless worlds of space. No one could have dreamed we were being scrutinized as someone with a microscope studies creatures that swarm and multiply in a drop of water. Few men even considered the possibility of life on other planets. And yet, across the gulf of space, minds immeasurably superior to ours regarded this Earth with envious eyes. And slowly and surely, they drew their plans against us.
Broadcasting live
from a tiny studio somewhere in North America.
This is Dark Matters Radio Live. And now I give you your host,
the silverback of ufology.
Here's Don Ecker.
And welcome back to a brand new edition of Dark Matters Radio. And as always, we are simply delighted you're here. And this all, of course, is being brought to you courtesy of KGRAdb. And let me start out by giving a special thanks to our producer, Ms. Chanel, who week in, week out does one great, fine job bringing this thing to the masses. Now, tonight, I've got a very special guest I'm going to be bringing on. This gentleman actually has been in and out, a part of Dark Matters Radio, going back to my very first show back in the early 90s, which, of course, was not DMR. Back in those days, it was UFOs Tonight, and we were carried on the cable radio network. And I got to tell you, for 5.5 years, roughly, not quite 6 years, that I did that show, we garnered from coast to coast, literally, because CRN was carried on cable television stations all across the country and on satellite radio, of course. We garnered, oh my God, a huge audience that became fixated on, honest to God, this is not hyperbole, getting their weekly fix of UFO stuff. Now, I had on many of those shows guests that would blow your mind. For example, one of my favorite guests back in those early days was Academy Award-winning film producer and director, Mr. Robert Wise. Do you remember the movies The Sand Pebbles, Steve McQueen? Do you remember The Andromeda Strain, a film that scared hell out of everybody? The very first Star Trek film, Star Trek, the motion picture. Oh yeah, Robert Wise did all of that. We had in studio the producer, director of Species, okay? Being out here real close to Hollywood and knowing the people that I knew then, I had a way of getting in with those folks. And then, of course, everybody across the UFO field, Bud Hopkins, Dave Jacobs, Bruce Maccabee, John Keel, Linda Moulton Howe, my very own wife, Vicki Cooper Ecker, who was the publisher and founder of UFO Magazine. Oh yeah, we had some great shows. And my guest, Mr. Stephen Bradford, was there for just about all of it. Now, as time went on, okay, 5.5 years, I had, in full disclosure, a rather serious falling out with station management. We had the highest rated show on their network. They had been promising me for years they were going to get us syndicated. Never happened. And when I would ask about it, oh, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. Well, finally, near the end, they brought in one night, okay, my regular producer, a gentleman by the name of Jeff Floro, who did a stellar job in his production values. They brought in this guy who had been literally a kid. This guy was about maybe 22, 23 years old. And I'm telling this story for the first time, okay? So feel yourselves privileged because I've never really talked about this very much. He came in and told Jeff, my producer, that he was going to rearrange the board, all right? Because Jeff wasn't doing it right. Now, this guy was brought over, and I'm not joking, from a shit-kicking country western station, okay? He started maneuvering the controls. My guest that night was Clifford Stone. We were going to be talking about a document that Stone had found from the Air Force called Project Moondust, okay? Now, this document is today probably very little known, but it showed that back in the 50s, the Air Force was concerned about unknown objects from space and near space, among other things. Right in the document, we were going to talk about this. So, as usual, got him on the phone. I'm in the broadcast studio. I hit the button. Boom, he's gone. Now I'm sitting there, dead air, right? And I said, hey, what's going on? Jeff, we got a problem here. Can you get him back, please? Well, he did. Hit it again. Boom. He was gone. This guy from the country western station had come in, and I don't know if he deliberately sabotaged this or if it was just his plain, unmitigated freaking incompetence. So I told Jeff, I said, Jeff, go to commercial and let me come in there. So we did. So I went in and Jeff told me, he said, this fucking guy came in and he screwed up the entire board. So I'm looking at this kid. He was a big kid too. And I said, look, you son of a bitch. And this is exactly what I said to him. We've been doing this effing show for 5 effing years. This guy has been the one running it. Now, I'm going to tell you, if you screw with him for the rest of the show, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to stomp your effing ass. And he believed me, and it's a good thing he did. So we got the show finally. We got Stone back. We did the show. And I had a meeting on Monday morning with station management. And I told him exactly where the bear defecated in the buckwheat. And he said something I didn't like. And I said, fine, I'm out of here. And that was the end of that show. Well, shortly thereafter, I went with a brand new radio network called Liberty Works. And I was doing a show 5 freaking nights a week. But with this gig, I was actually getting a paycheck. Not much, but some, okay? Until they went bankrupt in about 7 months. So I was out of work radio-wise for a couple of years. And then I decided to bring it back. I had made friends with Dwight Schultz, the movie actor. And Dwight was a radio fanatic. That's actually how I met him. And he used to tune in to UFOs Tonight on satellite. Okay. And I was giving a talk down at the Santa Monica Museum of Aviation. I had mentioned it on the program, and I said, if you're in the area, hey, come on down. I'd love to meet you. And he did. We became fast pals for years. Well, we decided, I knew a guy that had a satellite radio station. We decided to take a new show to them. And I was thinking about a name. My name on Liberty Works had been Strange Daze, Daze. But I said, that's not going to work for this. So I thought, and this was, by the way, about the middle of the presidential election between George W. Bush, the shrub, okay, and Heinz Ketchup. What the hell's the guy's name? He's the asshole that flies around the world in his private airplane telling everybody they got to get rid of coal and oil. Anyway, that guy. So we do this show for a year and going good, right? Going good. This is, by the way, if you've never done radio, this will give you kind of an idea how radio goes. Well, there was another radio guy here in the Southern California area, guy I knew. Actually, I had been interviewed on his show several times. I'm not going to mention his name, but I'd been interviewed on his show, and he turned out to be somewhat of an anti-Semitic fanatic. Okay. I didn't know this at the time. Some things came out anyway. I was particularly offended because he also was talking about what a rotten, shitty place America was. So on the next satellite show, Dwight and I discussed this guy, and I tore him a brand new ass. All right. I was furious about this guy, and we talked about it on my show. Well, as it turns out, the guy that had the satellite radio station had been in negotiations with this guy to bring him on his network. And I didn't know it. And we ended up burning our bridges there. Oh, God. Well, to be honest, I really didn't care. But the next thing we started was with Cyberstation USA. Now, Cyberstation was out of Boston. And I was also doing 5 nights a week with them. And we had some great times. And as a result of that, my rock and roll show also got launched. Did you know that I had a rock and roll show? Yep. It was called Don Ecker's Vicious Vinyl. Sex, drugs, rock and roll. And God, I had some fun with that for several years. We did everybody. And I'm talking about rock and roll primarily from the 60s and the 70s. We did the Stones. We did the Doors. We did Jimi Hendrix. We did the Mothers of Invention. Back when rock and roll was honest to God, real, freaking honest, downright gritty music. And I loved it. But unfortunately, like happens so often, I was with them from about 2010 to about 2017. And I got to tell you, I loved it. I loved the guy that was behind the scenes, my producer, Jeff Bartleben. I loved the guy. And I got to say, they basically ran out of money. Their equipment was breaking down. And basically, the show folded. They tried to stumble on for a while, but it finally all fell apart. And then a little bit later, I discovered KGRA. Ergo, here I am and have been since about 2017, 2018. But my guest tonight, okay, Stephen Bradford. Stephen was often a part of that on Cyberstation USA. So before I get too much further, let me bring everybody on board. Of course, we've got Mark Center, we've got Jerry Kissel, and my guest, Mr. Stephen Bradford. Stephen, hey, buddy, it's great to see you. How you been?
I'm well, Don. It's good always to be on your show and also to see everyone just healthy and Adam still.
Yeah, really. Yeah. And probably one of the reasons that Stephen mentioned that, and you correct me if I'm wrong, pal. Boy, a lot of people in the field have been dropping like flies, haven't they?
Yeah, there's been a few, I think, prominent deaths with, the loss of Bruce Maccabee certainly being one of them, and Biedny was another one of them.
Tracy Torme.
Further back, I think he was the first. Yeah. So unfortunately, we're at that.
Richard Faraday.
Well, yeah, that was certainly, devastating 4 years ago, but it's to the point where a lot of these original researchers now are certainly at that age where we're about to lose them. Why I think it's so important that we archive and chronicle as much of the information, whether it be oral stories like this radio show or written documents or papers, anything, and just try to preserve that because, they're not going to be here much longer for many of them.
You really started following UFOs Tonight about what time, Stephen?
You know what? I was very much into UFOs as a child up until about like 12 or 13 years old. And then actually I got really into the Bob Lazar thing. What was that? 89 to 92. Then, life gets in the way. You start playing sports, you go to high school, college, etc. And I remember it was around 2010. I was curious how the UFO field was still doing, how certain characters in the field were they alive, were they dead, what was going on with John Lear, where was Bob Lazar, etc. So I was working in a cubicle type job, and I just started listening to podcasts, and I went through a handful of them, reacquainting myself with the field, with the different researchers. And I was really unhappy with most of the podcasts that I was coming across. I thought they were poorly produced. The host was flaky. The guests were subpar or known frauds. And then I came across Dark Matters Radio. I believe that there was an archive on the Paracast. The Paracast at some point on the website had a link to your old UFOs Tonight. So it was around 2010 when I found your archives of UFO Tonight, which, as you know, was probably recorded sometime in the 90s, right? So I exhausted all of those. Then I found some links to Dark Matters Radio, and then I found the Cyber Station, and then I've tuned in ever since. So honestly, Don, I credit you in your professionalism and ability as a radio host to really drive my interest back up into this, because until I found you, I was listening to people like Jeff Rentz and Kerry Cassidy and Project Camelot, and it was just so ridiculous, most of that stuff. Then you find Don Ecker and you listen to some of the shows like you did with Bill Moore or Vito Sakari or any number of those people, and it was just worlds different and certainly superior. So that's the genesis of my interaction with Dark Matters Radio.
Okay, you mentioned a name, the gentleman that I knew. As a matter of fact, I brought him to television, Vito Sakari, back in 2014, when a producer I knew that after years of trying to spark some interest in doing a show on lunar moon phenomenon, okay, because I had been chasing that wildcat for well over 20 years. lunar phenomenon. Believe me, if ladies and gentlemen, if you don't know anything about it, or very little, let me tell you, there are a ton, and then another ton on top of that, of unanswered questions about phenomena and what appear to be manufactured structures of some type on the moon. Now, Vito Sicari was a guy that was a petroleum engineer at the time that I interviewed him, and I interviewed him right at Thanksgiving, 1995. Even today, and let me take a stab at a number. I would guess since 1991, when I started broadcasting, I probably have interviewed well over at least 1,000 people. Would you agree with that, Stephen?
Yeah, I mean, certainly if you just do the simple math, it probably would factor closer to 1,000 than 500.
Yeah, at least that many. Of all the people I interviewed, this guy stuck out more than any other interview I ever did. I had chills the night that I interviewed him. Okay. Literally, I had chills. Some of the things that he was saying. Here's the story in a nutshell. He was working for a petroleum company in Houston, Texas. They had I don't want to call it actually a sister company, but there was an American oil company down at that time, Venezuela, before they went commie, okay? And they had a working relationship. These people down in Venezuela would need something. Vito's company would manufacture, whatever the case was. And Vito, now this is in the late 1970s, okay, over teletype machine, okay, talking to the people in Venezuela, Vito became friendly with one of their engineers, a guy by the name of Lester Howes. Now, through a series of happenstances, the Venezuelan company sent Lester up to Houston. He was going to be up there roughly 3 weeks or so on a project that they were collaborating on. And when he got up there, okay, finally, it's like kind of like in a way today, only today is a little more technologically advanced. Many of the people that you communicate with are often on the computer, where you very rarely, especially if they're out of state or something, you ever meet them face to face. But you're dealing with them all the time. Like Stephen now. Stephen is no longer out here in Southern California. He's down in Florida. But we've known each other for years. A lot of our communication has been through the computers or texting on cell phones. So that's the way that goes. Well, it was kind of the same way with the teletype machine back in the 70s. But Lester gets to Houston. They meet each other in real for the first time. Fast buddies. And Lester said, well, when I came up here, Vito, I kind of had I had another reason for wanting to come up here. And Vito said, well, what was that? So Lester reaches into his back pocket, pulls out a book, hands it to Vito, and he said, here. He said, take this home tonight, read it, or as much of it as you can, and then we'll talk tomorrow. Well, the book was by an author by the name of George Leonard. The title, Somebody Else is on the Moon. Now, Leonard had been a science writer, George Leonard, okay? He knew some people at NASA at the end of the Apollo program. Got down there in the early 70s, and they showed him a bucket full of photographs taken by the astronauts with some very strange stuff on it. And some of those photographs were included in the book, but because it was a paperback book, etc., it was really hard to see a lot of the things that Leonard was talking about. So when this book came out in about 76, it disappeared off the shelves practically as quickly as it was introduced. Not because a lot of people were buying it, it was removed. Why would anybody do that? Well, it was removed, I think, because it blew the lid off of lunar secrecy. So, Vito took it home, read as much of it as he could, came back the next day, and Lester said, my ulterior motive, I want to go over to NASA here in Houston, and I want to see some of these photographs. Well, that put them on a 3-week odyssey with NASA. And NASA, our open space administration, right? That's how they were built. Well, guess what? Forget that horse shit, because they did everything to dissuade these guys they could do, including at one point threatening them with the Espionage Act to get the hell off their facility. Well, anyway, that's the story in a nutshell. And to hear that interview, it blows your mind. Stephen, you got anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, certainly. I think the key for me with that interview is I'm not a lunar expert, but I do have a pretty good BS filter, and I have a good knack when you hear someone speak, whether or not what they're saying is true, or what if they, or at least even if they believe it. And when you listen to that Vito Sakari interview, he certainly sounds as though those are real events. And it's just such an outlandish set of circumstances that unless he's a screenwriter, and he's not, he's a petrochemical engineer with no interest in any of this, I just don't see any reason why he would make any of it up. And essentially, it concluded with him getting able to see some of these images. They basically gave in to them and let them go into a room without any pencils, without any papers, without any ability to really document what they were looking at. And once they saw some of these high resolution images, they saw the types of things that Leonard had mentioned in his book, like artificiality, some sort of machinery, and it scared the heck out of them. And, there's been some attempts to discredit them by people like Jim Oberg. And one of the things that I think is just so ridiculous is the fact that somebody like Oberg, who spent so many years and hours on the NASA campus, the only thing he can do to say that the story is inaccurate or isn't true or fabricated is the fact that he really takes offense to the way Vito Sakari describes some of the buildings and the layouts. And to me, that's such a stupid thing because, Vito Sakari doesn't work at NASA. He's never been on that campus. He doesn't know the building. He's just a guy trying to tell you as best he can where he thought he was, what building he thought he went in. And it would be like taking somebody that's never been to a major university, dropping them off at Ohio State, letting them walk around for 20 minutes, go in a couple buildings, taking them out, and then saying, where the heck were you? Well, a professor there would be like, no, that's actually not where he was. That's the wrong, but he was there. He just didn't get the buildings right. But for me, the real interesting thing about the story was the sincerity in his voice and the way he told it, and the fact that he really had no interest in this field whatsoever. I mean, the guy didn't even know of the book until it was handed to him. So, and honestly, the pace of the interview and the questions Don asked, I think, add to it as well. I think if anyone else were to interview him, it would not have been as successful. But I just think anybody that has any intellect, if they were to listen to that, would come away believing that the story they heard was true without even knowing much about the moon.
Well, we haven't heard from my two co-hosts yet. Mark looks like he's having a little bit of technical difficulty. Gary, do you was that a show? Was that a show you heard? Vito Sakari? No.
No.
Mark did.
But I'm really curious about in the private checks, I've been reading this, and I looked up this Jeff Rentz, and that was the problematic dude that you were talking about. That's anti-Semitic, right?
I will neither confirm nor will I deny.
Thank you. Someone else is on the moon. You know what I would find funny is if we discover it was nothing more than a temple built for Stephen Greer.
And speaking of folks who died who used to be in the subject, there's Video Dave. Hey, Dave.
Video Dave Aaron. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Colorful character.
Crazy, Dave. And I'd just like to say before anybody else says anything else, allegedly. Just put that on
allegedly
out of my mouth. Allegedly. Yes.
Allegedly.
Yeah, and ladies and gentlemen, yesterday, Sunday, May the 19th, in the year 2024, Mr. Jagari Kissel had a birthday. It was a monumental birthday. He turned the right old age of 6 and 0. Oh my God! Jagari.
I was very happy. My daughter came over.
Were your bones creaking when you got up?
When I wake up in the morning, it's like, God, I don't know how to describe it. You know, I just hit that point where it's like, why am I getting up? I can feel the bone on bone shit. And I'm like, what is the point of this? And my daughter, though, she just cheers me up. She's just so stupid and so wonderful all at the same time. Just says like the most brilliant and then follow up with dumbest shit that I've ever heard on my life. And she'll come in and try to talk to me about climatology. And I'm like, that was what I took in college, right? And your science doesn't work. It doesn't work that way. It's like the greatest test, Stephen. I think you'll like this one. You're not allowed to discuss climate with me if you can't answer this one simple question. What has over 95% impact on climate? And we see it every day. What is it? Do, 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 do. So many of my lefty friends can never answer. They go, volcanoes? No, it's the fucking sun.
Cell phones?
Cell phones? Cow farts? No, it's called the sun.
The sun and the ocean.
Yep. And the moon itself has a minor impact on it too, due to its reflection and how it works on the tide and the changing of temperatures. But every time the sun heats up, we get hot. And every time it cools down, it gets cold.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. It's sort of like...
So let's ask Mr. Bradford, and I'll preface this about the UAPs, Grush, and all this stuff, because that's the newest stuff. Wait, that's the newest stuff. I'm watching Grush on Newsmax or something, brand new, and I would like everybody to chime in when you're done, but it seemed very Greer-like what he was saying, and what he was saying after almost a year now of no more information. What we need to do is we need to make this thing political, and we need to kick out the people that don't want to have disclosure and vote people in who do want to have disclosure. I'm not going to say one way or the other about that. That's his view, but it's coming from a guy with nearly 365 days of no new information, only stories. And I just found it interesting that he's going there now. So what's your view on the whole thing, since we haven't talked to you since this UAP thing exploded?
Yeah, I think what's interesting is when I was on a previous episode of Dark Matters Radio, it was right around the time when Congress was going to write that report that they were going to release. And Don asked me if I thought anything was going to come from the report and what I thought would be the next step in, I'm going to put it in air quotes, but in disclosure, because frankly, I don't think it's ever going to come in any sort of classical way, formal way for sure. However, I told Don at the time, and this is way before David Grush, this might have been 2 years ago. I told Don, I said, I think that the way that this subject moves forward isn't going to be through congressional investigations or congressional committees. I don't think Congress is capable of solving anything, let alone something as complex as the UFO phenomenon. But I did tell him, and my speculation at that time was that the topic would be moved forward, for better or for worse, through whistleblowers, much like Edward Snowden came forward on this domestic surveillance front because he had specific access. I thought at that time that the next move that we would see would be whistleblowers coming forward. And then lo and behold, sometime there afterwards, we're there with David Grush. Now, Grush is a real interesting guy in the sense that he certainly was in the positions that he says he was in. He certainly has the credibility and seemingly the access to talk to the people he said he talked to. The other, on the downside, is a lot of his stuff is secondhand, but he claims that his sources that he worked with, which he's been willing to name under oath in Congress, in skiff rooms oftentimes, would either be what he called compliant or combative witnesses to what he had to say. The fact that nothing new has come out of that, I don't really necessarily think is really a discredit on him, but rather just the tight lid that government in general has on this topic. And one other thing in his defense is he's a bit of an odd duck, and he's admitted, at least on some of the interviews I've seen, that he is somewhat autistic. He's like a high functioning autistic guy. So some of his weird just characteristics, I really look towards that. But in terms of his comment about, well, we need to start voting in people that share the disclosure goal or what have you. To me, it's like when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And somebody like Grush and people like Elizondo and Mellon, they come from a specific perspective. So when you're in the defense sector or you're in the, part of the intel sector, everything from that perspective is going to be a threat, right? Because that's what you're paid to do. Your job is I'm in the military intelligence, I evaluate threats. So of course, anything that they see is going to be a threat. A guy like Grush, who spent some time on Capitol Hill, who gave the daily presidential briefing, he's going to look at this from a political lens and say, well, the only way to fix this is through voting. So I don't necessarily know if that's really something that's nefarious or just a byproduct of the fact that he is sort of tied to politicians and politics. So once again, the analogy is everything, if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. I mean, I like
that answer because that's his world.
Well, I love guys like Walter Bosley and then in that sense, Greg Bishop, but their perspective has always been disinformation. Greg Bishop writing the book Project Beta, which focused on disinformation. And then Walter Bosley really being an AFOSA guy, he understands disinformation. And where they come down on a lot of these issues is, well, it's disinformation. What we're seeing is secret government programs that the government's using to, disinform us. And, so again, they have a perspective too. And not to say that any one of them is wrong, they could be right. But I think that, really the key is getting all of these different perspectives in the same room and sort of kicking the topic around as opposed to being so myopic. Like, we're going to go take it to Congress and that's going to fix it. Like, are you kidding me? Like, I don't think that this situation can even be properly understood unless there's a complete historic retrospective that is really presented to some people in Congress, because they're still acting as though the first instance of this phenomena was in 2017 with that New York Times article, when there are so many other cases that are they're far more interesting than that. And I think well attested to. Like, I want to see Bob Jacobs footage. Why isn't he in front of Congress? Where's Lieutenant Mansman that said that he watched the video with Bob Jacobs of the flying saucer shooting the Atlas rocket out, and they have the telemetry, they have the videotapes. Like, let's start with that first. That's what I'd like to see. Not talk about the Tic Tac and these awful videos that the Navy keeps releasing. It seems like a massive distraction from my perspective.
Did you read my disclosure paper? I sent that to you, right?
You did. It was very good. Yeah, I agreed with almost all of it. Yeah, and I think we're on the same page that this is not going to be fixed at the government level, unfortunately. It's going to have to take, in my opinion, some sort of leak, some sort of whistleblower, or the phenomenon manifesting in ways that are really, irrefutable at that point.
Inexplicable events like Independence Day, what Will Smith saw. Something.
Yeah, but then you're still going to have those people that are going to say, well, it's biblical, or it's a hologram, or it's just advanced tech. And, I'm not sure you're ever going to convince anybody of anything, but at least it moves the ball a little bit closer to, I think, the goal line, which I don't think
we also saw this last week that the Vatican is stepping up its game, because I think they've been fully aware a long time of intelligence in there. Not, I don't want to say outer space, but there. And they're finally just now stepping up their game this last week. And News Nation had some coverage of that, another conservative news channel I watch. And they were talking about Vatican stepping up its game to do research into what these things are.
Well,
and they have top researchers.
The Jesuits have been involved in that going back many years. They have I guess they still do, an observatory down in Arizona that was one of the questions they were asked about extraterrestrial life. And they were seemingly very upfront about it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been an explosion, if you've been paying attention, on like exorcisms now and demonism and all this stuff. There's been an explosion there. I don't know if that's a reflection of where we find ourselves as a society or not, but some of that comes from the church and all that too. So,
but the Catholic Church has become more cynical about exorcisms and the whole thing about demonology and shit. I think they're more cynical than the Pentagon.
Well, there is a strain of Christianity, okay, and I'm talking usually much more fundamentalist than mainstream, that sees the entire UFO UAP phenomenon as strictly demonic.
Because you were the one who told me about that there are people within the Pentagon who considered it demonic.
Yeah, the Collins Elite, the book that Nick Redfern wrote, I think was the first time that I've certainly seen a handful of pastors and so forth online for decades now that have really pointed to these things as being demonic. But that was the first time that I ever read a book that talked about an official belief within the Pentagon that what they were dealing with was some sort of demonic manifestation of some kind, and that really bothered a lot of them, and they didn't want to touch it. And I remember when that book came out, I really thought that was kind of a peculiar thing to have to read, and now it seems the more that this topic gets revealed, that there does actually seem to be, through some of these testimonies and whistleblowers, a contention within government that is really uncomfortable with this because of their political leanings and their, I don't know what it is, frankly, but they really lean heavily on the side that this could be something demonic. And, who knows, maybe it manifests in a technological way, in a way to fool mankind. I'm like, if you're really open to the religious aspects of it, of evil and demons and all that comes with that, then I guess it's not outside of your worldview to think that, something evil or demonic or supernatural could manifest its way in a technological way to fool mankind or something. So it's a fascinating topic, but I think the more you get into it, as we're discovering, it's not just always about metal aircraft or crafts that are nuts and bolts. I think that there's a lot of complexity to this topic, and which is frankly why it fascinates me.
A year or two ago, I guess it's been 2 years ago now, for a short span of time, I had contact with Luis Elizondo before he began ghosting me. Okay. And I had been put in touch with him by Tracy Torme, okay, who had called me up when Elizondo first hit the news, and he wanted to meet this guy. Okay, now this is after the revelation of the Nimitz Battle Group encounter and Harry Reid's 2017 December press briefing about acquiring money for the ATIP program and all that business. But I was trying to get Elizondo to come on the show because I really wanted to interview him about what he claims to have experienced. And at one point, he told me that at the Pentagon, he had been approached by a very senior military officer who wanted to caution him about staying away from this topic. And of course, Elizondo wanted to know why. And he said, well, we know what they are. They're straight from hell. They're demonic. It's Satan, okay? Now, this was supposedly a senior flag rank military officer. Now, I don't know about you guys, okay? Gary, you served in the military. I don't think either Stephen or Mark did, but you know that if you're a senior military officer and unknown things are flying around in your sky, the first thing you want to know is what the hell are they? Are they hostile? What's their intention? What's their intent? Where are they coming from? And to completely turn away from it and try to ignore it, that blew my mind. I don't know. What do you got?
It's the ostrich principle. Burying your head, it just doesn't work.
Also, if you're a professional soldier and you're going to go down the religious route, is he going to do that just to sort of troll this guy, or does he really believe it? As Stephen said, depending on your beliefs and your work, everything's a nail, right? So if a lot of people think it's demonic and demons and stuff, probably a lot of those people believe in, religion and things. So, but why would this guy do that? It sounds like a troll to me.
Or he did some background information. I don't know a lot about Lou Elizondo, but perhaps it was, known that Lou Elizondo is a very spiritual guy or has very strong religious conviction. So they thought that might be a way to detour him because it might be something he was passionate about. It could be intentional that it went that way. I think that's just an interesting part of it, though. And I don't really discount that as well. I mean, again, I tell a lot of people that don't really buy into my interest in UFOs or whatever, I don't claim to know or believe. I just find it a fascinating topic that I think it has some legitimacy. I think there is a real phenomenon. Now, what that is, I don't know. But if you ask these same people that don't share the interest, what do you think about simulation theory? Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, some leading edge thinkers and PhDs and academics are really like digging into this idea of a simulation and the idea that we could be in some sort of generative universe. And there's really somebody that's controlling this, basically replaying history or trying to play with variables to see how us as a simulation would react to whatever. Okay, so then you have to think that if this is just a simulation, that means there's a simulator that is an intelligence behind it. How hard would it be for them to put some inexplicit things in the sky, so to speak, now and then to see how we respond and what that does to our worldview or our technology and so forth. So, and then they just get like a little bit dumbfounded. But I think you listen to a guy like Neil deGrasse Tyson who has no interest in UFOs and he thinks it's hogwash. He'll talk to you for hours about simulation theory and the possibility that we could actually be in a simulation. Yet, I mean, to me, if you're open-minded to the point that all of this is a simulation, the idea that things can pop in and out of it that seem inexplicable or strange seems totally reasonable to me. But that's just my perspective. But, a lot of these people still laugh at the phenomena while then going down the rabbit hole of simulation theory. So I don't know.
So speaking of laughing at it, let's play a little Crossfire, Stephen Bradford.
Sure.
The secrets of Skinwalker Ranch. Is it part of the solution or part of the problem?
I think, I'm one of those people where I'm not really a binary thinker. I don't think it has to be either or. I think it can be both. I think it's possible that you have a location like Skinwalker Ranch that's very anomalous, that's very interesting, that things happen that you can also profit from, capitalize on, market, and create an entertaining show around. I don't think it has to be either or. I do find the place itself to be quite interesting. I've read a lot of the books pre-Skinwalker Ranch to be interesting. I take a lot of what I see on that show with a grain of salt, but there are some inexplicable things like just weird radiation readings and some of the stuff that happens to the rockets. I mean, they brought a rocket scientist from FSU, and he shot his rockets up in the air, and he shot thousands of them, and it didn't come back. And he said it was the first time in his whole career he shot a rocket up in such a remote, open place, it never got the rocket back. So, I mean, sure, you could say there's a producer out there on an ATV that's going to find it and grab it and drive off with it just for ratings. And that might be the case, but I think it is probably an interesting place. I do think anomalous things happen there for a variety of reasons. And I think you've got places like Discovery or History Channel with like, oh, well, we can market this and make money off of it and massage it a little bit too and spice it up a little bit. So, that's just the nature of entertainment. Some of these reality shows do it all the time. Some of the emotions are real, but they're sort of manufactured in this scenario that they put the people in. Give them a bunch of alcohol, sit them across from each other, and then watch them argue. I mean, that's all of reality.
That takes me back to the whole Johnny Carson making fun of every UFO abduction.
Right.
A couple of guys out on a boat in the South drinking some booze.
Yeah, and that was the trope for a long time. And I guess the one positive from all of this is the fact that, at least for, even if you want to call it disinformation, if you want to say it has a political agenda to it, or if it's all nonsense, at least the fact there are people with some degree of credibility and academic pedigree looking at this subject from a serious perspective. And the idea that it's just a bunch of drunk rednecks looking at the sky pointing, I think, is really a thing of the past. And that's something that I think is favorable, because I think as long as it's at least a serious topic, more serious people might start to look at it. And I think to get some, breakthrough in this investigation, it's going to require more serious people from diverse backgrounds looking into this, as opposed to, what they would call the laughter curtain of years past.
Right. For me,
physicists. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
For me, with that show, if you want disclosure or more serious, then for me anyway, the multitude of that show is horse shit. And they shouldn't be presenting the information in the way that they do, where a drone will fly this episode, but it won't fly next episode. A rocket will hit something up there this episode, and yet it won't hit the same something the next. And they go, it's all over the freaking map. And it's like, this isn't part of the solution, folks. I mean, if you really want to do science.
I know that, Mark, and at least I think in the shows, but I haven't seen the show since like season 1 or 2. But I think that's exactly what John Alexander claimed that the phenomena does on that ranch. It manifests itself in such strange ways where one day it'll do something and the next day nothing will happen, or nothing will happen for a month. And he says it just seems like, unlike the UFO phenomena, he says it just seems like there's an intelligence out there that's just basically playing with us, playing with our experiments, playing with the people. And maybe the show is designed to sort of embrace that and present it like that. Or maybe that's just how this weird phenomena manifests itself over there.
It might, but when you have folks who are getting sick from radiation and then like, well, we're going back out to the ranch this weekend. Well, I thought you just got sick from the radiation. Oh, it's nothing to worry about.
Well, my favorite episode is when they were doing the ground penetrating radar, right? And next to it was Travis with his meter looking for radiation. He's like, look at the meter's spiking. Look at the meter. I'm like, well, yeah, you are standing next to a guy with a giant device doing ground penetrating radar. It's not surprising that you might be picking that up on your meter. I always laughed at that. You'd think a guy with his pedigree would be smart enough to realize that, yesterday
he's
like
one
that.
of those physicists that I've always admired. And another one I admire is Eric Weinstein. And
I love the guy. He's really bright.
That guy has really. I loved when he shit on Neil deGrasse Tyson. Said, "Oh, he's not a real scientist.
He's not. He's
got the degree, but he's never done any He's never done any research.
He's not writing
papers, baby.
Yes. He's a popularizer. The media uses him.
Mouthpiece.
He's right
for the science community, and he considers him pretty much useless.
I agree.
But he's also one of these people who is defying the string theory, and that it doesn't work that way. We can't test it. And if you can't test it,
he hates it.
If you can't test the theory, then you need to put it aside and find a theory that you can test.
Yeah,
he's got some theories of his own.
He's a bright guy.
He believes that some of this shit right now with UFOs is being manufactured.
I can't discount that. I think that's accurate. I think a lot of this stuff is technology. When I see the Tic Tac had a little antenna-like probe that went underneath it, to me that just sounds like something manufactured on Earth. The idea that it has a pendulum that looks like some sort of antenna that's doing something, to me this sounds like human technology. I just can't imagine something that comes interstellar or even
and
dimensionally.
That's what Eric Weinstein is saying.
You know,
he says he thinks that some of this stuff is being manufactured. Now, he said that
Gary, you're going to have to hold that thought. You're going to have to hold that thought.
Oh, good. I got to pee so bad.
And we'll pick up there with you, Gary, when we get back. This is Dark Matters Radio tonight. Stephen Bradford, my very special guest, along with Mark, Gary, and yours truly. We'll see you in a minute. And obviously, we are back. Gary, did you want to pick up where you were at when we had to go to break?
The things that are being alleged is that this could be politically motivated to basically do what they did in Watchmen, which, if you know that graphic novel, that this giant alien is killed in the center of New York and a bunch of people are dead, and putting the fear of God into citizens in order to garner more authority and control. And that's one of the things I think Eric Weinstein was building into.
You mean like a pandemic?
Yeah, like a pandemic, because I think that was just an experiment to test what people, stupid leftist people will do, and fall for. And I walked around. I have, asthma. I'm diabetic. I walked around, and I never got sick. I never got sick one time.
Yeah, I didn't
I'm
get
old
sick either. I mean, I know people who evidently got it and got sick and all that. But
well, I lost friends to it.
Right. So Stephen, you did a mini documentary on Norio. You want to talk about that a bit?
Conspiratologist. I like that. First, I like that title. I like the title of your documentary.
Apparently, that's a phrase that Norio will tell you that Gary Schultz coined, and it doesn't exist in the dictionary. And it just, in Norio's words, it's really someone who rather studies the byproducts of the conspiracies as it relates to the public perception or how it interacts with the public, as opposed to somebody a conspiracy theorist who just, necessarily believes everything or proposes outlandish things. My experience with Norio was actually interesting. I've always found him to be kind of a colorful guy. I think he's been in the field a very long time. And I think for me, what differentiated Norio from, somebody else was the fact that he was so quirky, the fact that he was in a country Western band.
Mm-hmm.
He came from Tokyo, Japan to teach Spanish, and it's in New Mexico. He came here to learn Spanish and ended up teaching it at the high school level before becoming an undertaker. I mean, it's just it's a wild story, and
it sounds like Sean Connery's bio.
It's just nobody has that bio. Nobody's from Tokyo that comes to the university in New Mexico to study Spanish to become a Spanish teacher, only then to leave that to become an undertaker and study UFOs. So, and then playing a country Western band where he wore absolute big giant hats and the flannel shirts. I mean, it's absolutely hysterical.
Wait, it's Buckaroo Banzai.
Yes. And so I really just thought, as I continued to play with documentaries and filmmaking, I thought that would be a good first attempt to really create a short documentary on something that I think would be interesting, certainly to me, but also I think
do a longer version of that?
Appeal to others. Pardon me?
Have you planned to do a longer version?
You know what? We have actually, in a lot of ways, Ori wanted to do something that was maybe serial in the sense that each episode would be like a different researcher, you know, like maybe it's Norio, maybe it's Don, maybe it's the next one would be Greg or Walter or whatever. I think that could be interesting too. But honestly, for me, it was just somebody that I respect. I thought he's an interesting guy. He's got a great backstory. He really was on the ground like Don, and that's one of the reasons why I like Don's content as well. As I look at like the late 80s and early 90s as the UFO golden age for someone my age. Mm-hmm. And that was when everything seemed to be going on. You had the MJ-12 documents, you had the Bob Lazar, you had Area 51, you had the X-Files, sightings, encounters, hard copy, CNN, Larry King Live. Every single week, it was just like something UFO related was going on. And I've always liked the people from that era. And unfortunately, we're as we talked about earlier, we're to the point now where we're losing some of them. So my goal with Norio was really to try to capture some of his perspectives and memories and present it in a way that I think was fun and colorful without getting too deep. Now, with that being said, to create that documentary, I did a 3-hour sit-down interview with Norio where we touched upon everything from Michael Younger to the octopus to MJ-12 to Bill Moore to his belief that some of this could be demonic to a whole host of things, which I think is fascinating and worth further research. I think, but for the documentary, I tried to keep it really surface level. I'd like to do something a little bit deeper that might include Benowitz a little bit, because we spent a lot of time out at Kirkland.
Have you met Benowitz?
No, he's passed away as far as, years ago, but his family is very standoffish. I will say that, Don, I did listen to a Crossfire episode where I believe that you guys had on the researcher from Texas who did the book. Oh man, I really like him. He's a really good interview. You got to help me out with his name, Don. He did. He hung out with John Lear back in the day. He knew Benowitz. He just wrote.
Oh, I'm drawing a blank, Stephen.
Yeah, real unique accent.
Only name that pops into my head that I've read is Bud Hopkins.
No. He knew Benowitz. He knew more. You just had him. I heard a repeat of Crossfire on Paranormal Radio, and you were talking about it. I don't want to get too sidetracked, but that guy was real interesting too. He was on the ground. I mean, he said that he actually met Benowitz's son and was able to communicate with him a little bit, but the family is still very guarded about.
Right, I can't recall his name. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and he was saying that maybe from his perspective that the family might have just been bought off as a way of just sort of like not pursuing this anymore because of what they did.
Bought off or threatened.
Or threatened, yeah, or maybe both, yeah.
Well, you better hurry up if you want to do any more with Norio, because his birthday's in October. He'll be 80.
I'll tell you what, man, that guy, he hikes those mountains and he goes up there and he moves. That guy he's not going anywhere anytime soon.
He's in New Mexico, right?
He's active. He's tack sharp. And he's up in those mountains. And if you watch his little YouTube channel, he's always filming up around those mountains. And you got to walk up those. We went on a day or two excursion, and he was, especially with us with our camera equipment, it was very difficult to keep up with. Now we're going to see Starlink base. Now we go to Kirkland. Now we go to Rio Rancho and get Indian food. Now we go. I'm like, geez, where can I go next?
So where can someone access the documentary?
I will post it on Don's Dark Matters Radio forum and send a link to you guys and share it, send it out, however.
All right. Has it been submitted for review for awards or anything?
Yeah, we've won quite a number of awards. We premiered at the Santa Fe Film Festival, which, unbeknownst to me, was quite a large film festival that was founded by the guy who does,
I know you won for global something in Los Angeles.
Yeah, we won the we've won like 4 film awards with that one, but the fact is that it premiered at the Santa Fe Film Festival, which is a very large film festival, and they actually kicked this other Native American movie out of the large theater to put ours in there, which was awesome because there was probably maybe 100 people that watched it, and Norio was there with his wife, and I don't think he had any idea what was going to happen, and he was just blown away that many people wanted to see.
That's so
film.
Cool. That's really cool.
Yeah, it was great. Red carpet, and he was there meeting the other filmmakers. It was a really cool experience for him.
Are there any classic researchers who are still with us? And I agree, the 90s were crazy. Who you wouldn't want to do? Like, I think I would hands off.
No, I'm down. I'm sort of like, I'm open to talk to anybody, and even the woo-woo quacks, I think, are fascinating, even though they're full of BS. Like, I would love.
You mean like Stephen Greer?
I would love to sit down with Dan Burish and just pick on him for like 2 hours. I think that would be so much fun.
I'd love you to pick apart Stephen Greer, because that guy, nobody challenges that guy.
No, and I don't think he would go on an outlet where he could not control all the variables. He would never come on and deal with like an.
I'll tell you right now, it would never happen.
He would never do it, right? Because he wants to control.
He's a chicken shit.
We're seeing that a little bit with Elizondo and Mellon. They have their preferred outlets, as I like to call them, and they won't deviate from them. They want to be with their defenders. It's just like CNN will pick a couple conservatives that they're comfortable putting on the show, but no one else. And Fox will do the same thing. They'll have a couple Democrats that are like, okay, but then no one else. And that's just how it is in the U.S. But they want a comfortable audience where they can sort of get softball questions and not have to really be pushed too difficult. And I think if Stephen Greer was pushed, he would actually probably get up and leave the interview. And one of the more interesting things I've ever seen from Project Camelot in Carrie Cassidy was she did, like, maybe 12 or 15 years ago, she was able to get Stephen Greer to do an interview with her and her partner at that time about the UFO topic. And it was outside. They literally just like kind of cornered him in some locker room part of the hotel. And he sat there for about 40 minutes. And she was, he started his whole spiel about how these aliens are here to help humanity and they don't hurt anyone. And all the abductions are military, and the aliens are beings of spiritual and light. And Carrie was, she's a bit woo-woo, but she's like, no, some of them are Draco, some of them are Dracula, some of them are killing people, abducting people. And he was just so uncomfortable with that line. He just stormed out of there, and that was the end of it. But I think that was a real fun case of where he was really uncomfortable. It was
Is that captured on video?
Yeah, it is. I'll find it. I mean, it's so sad.
Yeah, find it, because I'd love to see that.
It's so bad, you guys, because all of this stuff after COVID, and this could be another, like I said, we were talking about how things don't have to be binary. COVID could be a real thing that affects people, and then also the government can then piggyback on it and find ways to exploit it. And one of the things they were able to do is really sanitize and censor the internet after COVID and go after just about every single alternative platform that even asked anything that was even controversial at the time. So all of those Project Camelots, which I watched just mainly for the humor of them, but occasionally there were some interesting guests on there. They're all gone. You can't find this stuff anymore. Only thing you can find when you type in UFOs now on YouTube or the internet and you go to images is just that stupid Tic Tac picture and the Nimitz, and over, go to Google, type it in. It almost seems like that whole thing was just a way of sanitizing the internet from all this information. It got to the point where the data was just coming in from so many sources that it feels like they needed to just create one massive story to sort of suck everything into so they can then go on the back channels and get rid of all this other stuff. You can't find the Bob Jacobs stuff anymore where he talks about the Atlas rocket. You find bits and pieces of it. You can't find, it's so difficult. You can find Greer stuff. He's still there, and that I think is telling, the ones that they allow to stay up versus the ones they take down. But I do think that Project Camelot interview does exist with Stephen Greer, and I will find it and I will send it to you. It's great.
I appreciate it, man.
Yeah.
I would really love to see that.
Yeah, he was very uncomfortable when she said that not all aliens were.
That's what pisses me off with him is, like, because I'm a big fan of Sean Ryan.
I love the
guy.
I got
pissed when he had him and Joe Rogan both have had Greer on and they don't challenge him.
Well, the problem is they're not.
They can't because they don't have the education to challenge.
They don't know.
If Steven was there or Don was there and he got the headlock, you can do it.
If Don showed up, Greer would probably like, oh, there's something wrong with my connection.
Yeah, correct. 100%.
Bro. Because
Joe just doesn't have.
People are terrified of him.
No, they go with who they think is. Oh, well, this guy's. He's got all these followers and he's written a book. And this guy, he must be the authority on this, and he's not. The guy is. He wants to be a sort of a Christ-like figure. An entryway into communicating with these spiritual beings. I think originally Greer started off with a good, healthy interest. I think that he started with real curiosity. And I think because of his stature as a doctor and his location in DC, he was able to meet some people. And I think somewhere along the line, he either got flipped or just thought, wow, I can maybe market on this and cast myself in some sort of spiritual light with some, what I would call devotees. I mean, those people that follow him are devotees. They're not looking for any real answers. They're out there doing meditations and, oh, 3 aliens landed and the ship land. Where's the video? I want to see it. Oh, we have it. And it's some blurry shit. You can't even tell what it is.
Well, and that's the problem with a lot of these guys now, that we have 30 to 40 years of media-based material to look back on. Somebody like Richard Hoagland, interesting guy, some interesting stuff, but I think that there's a reason. I don't know what his health is like, but Don has talked to him. He seems to be okay. I think there's a reason why you don't hear from him as much as you used to, because a lot of that information didn't really pan out. But with Greer, it never stops. He just keeps on putting this crap out there and out there, and there's no follow-up generally, or there's an excuse. And it's like, I kind of respect Dick Hoagland even more by just saying, I'm not saying he was wrong about some of the stuff, but clearly he extended himself out a little far with the facts, and he's kind of backed off. And it's kind of like, well, that's probably the right thing to do.
And I don't think Hoagland could really, nobody can question his passion. I mean, the guy is obsessed with this stuff in a way, like before Prophet. He's obsessed with the moon and the anomalies and his little research and his, obsession with Star Trek. And this is his little niche that he's done to do this.
Right.
But Greer, I think, really sees profit dollars. And, he started that whole free energy company where he was going to create a free energy device if he just got enough money. And that's when you start to see the red flags, because this field is robust with people making those sorts. George Green.
Also, he's butthurt that he was left out of the UAP thing completely. Yeah. Right. So he's over here on the side with his documentaries. Correct. And it's like, wait a minute, all this action is happening over here, and I'm not part of this. And it's just eating him up.
All right, and of course the only thing he can do then is attack the messengers. Well, this is all a CIA operation. That guy is just a paid, and it might be, but he's not going to give any credibility. And as long as everybody's fighting with one another, you're not really going to move the ball at all.
And he's always struck me as somebody that probably gets paid by the CIA to create disinformation. So
it's possible.
Yeah. And I think that's the biggest fear. Over. Yeah, I caught Don Eckert chuckling when I brought up the book Missing Time by Bud Hopkins. What was that chuckle over? I was like, uh-oh, there's something I don't know about Bud Hopkins. What is this?
Well, Vicki and I had a very dear friend here, Dr. Richard Neal. Neal was a gynecologist.
That's a doctor who looks at vaginas.
Yeah, thanks.
Sorry, Kissel, you truly are occasionally an asshole, okay? Okay. So shut your yap while I tell the story. I'm good at telling stories, by the way. Richard Neal was a very interested into the UFO phenomena, especially abductions, for years. And we met him. Back in the early days of the magazine, we would be invited and would attend some of these meetings where people alleging the abduction experience, and we'd sit in there and listen to what they had to say. And Dr. Neal came to us and said, he said, the big thing at that time was the missing fetus syndrome. Okay. Do you remember that? Mm-hmm. A woman, even if she didn't have sexual relations, would suddenly become, or she thought she became pregnant. And sometime during the first trimester, inexplicably, the pregnancy would disappear. And this was a big thing, back in the early 90s. And the abduction phenomenon became the tail that wagged the dog.
Mm-hmm.
So he said, I would like you, if you would, introduce me to Bud Hopkins and Dave Jacobs, Dr. Dave Jacobs, who incidentally was an academic doctor, not a medical doctor. But they were both doing in-depth investigations on abductees. So I said, sure. So I called Bud. I called Bud Hopkins. We knew Hopkins and Jacobs both very well. And I told him about Neil. And I said, basically, Dr. Neil would like to interface with you, would like to talk to some of your clients, okay, the abductees, and he's trying to scientifically, not stories, not not documentaries, anything else, scientifically examine whether these fetuses actually, number one, are there, and number two, do they actually disappear inexplicably? And Hopkins and Jacobs turned Neil down flat. Didn't even want to talk to him. Okay. Now that, I got to tell you, that was a mind blower for both Vicky and I, because all the time we're doing this, we have one objective, and that's to get as much true factual information as possible into UFO Magazine. We had done a lot of articles with Hopkins. We had done a lot of articles with Jacobs. And we did a lot of articles with Dr. Richard Neal. And Neal finally came to the conclusion, well, I think that many of these cases are in fact hysterical pregnancies. Now, the abduction phenomenon has always been problematic for me. Number one, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist, although I did play one on the street occasionally when I was a cop.
Mm-hmm.
But I was always, and when I say this word I'm about to say, I mean every letter of it. I was terrified of doing more harm to some of these people than anything else, okay, by giving them the wrong advice. And I had a lot of people come to me, all right, at the magazine and at the radio show. Don, I think I've been abducted and I'm having a hard time with this. What do I do? Well, you know, when you're in a position like that, and I thought long and I thought hard about it. And finally, I came to the conclusion. This is what I told them. And I know I've said this before on the show. I would say, number one, look, if you're having a hard time dealing with this experience you think you've undergone, and you basically can't put it out of your mind, if you're asking for my advice, this is what I would suggest. Number one, talk to your family physician about it. Be open with them. And so a lot of these people had marks, you know, the abductee marks. Yeah, I'm sure you guys have all heard about that, the scoop marks, that kind of stuff. I said, talk to them. Show them any evidence you might have. Tell them what you recall, etc., and see if that will help. If that doesn't help, then again, I would suggest you consider talking to a mental health professional.
Get
now,
professional input. Yeah.
I am not suggesting you're having mental problems. All right, or you're mentally ill. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying these professionals might be the right way to go.
Yep.
And last but not least, my God, do not go to a UFO hypnotherapist.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now,
absolutely.
I've been to several of those hypnotherapies, invited from the magazine. And of course, I'd go in, sit down, I'd shut my mouth, wouldn't say a freaking word. And the day that I saw the hypnotherapist who had the subject lying on a couch under the hypnosis and talking about their alien experience, the hypnotherapist asked the abductee, well, what planet did they come from? And I knew right then and there, boom, this is bullshit.
They're
I didn't
front-loading.
say that.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I had experience as a law enforcement officer. It's not well known, but occasionally law enforcement agencies will use hypnotherapy to see if a victim, for example, of a crime or something, to see if they can get additional information. It's not something
the name that they call it is regression therapy.
Yeah. So, that was my take on it. But talking about Bud, every time I hear Bud Hopkins, I think about him refusing that medical scientist from talking to any of his abductees. And that told me tons right there.
That's interesting because it brings something to mind to me. I don't know a lot about Neil. I know I read about him in your magazine, but it brings to mind, or top of mind, as one might say, Roger Lear. So Bud says, I don't want you to interact with my people to get maybe some physical data from them. Well, I'm not going to tell you that Roger Lear didn't possibly remove some odd things. I don't know. The problem is nobody knows, because what did they never do with those? As far as I know, they never turned those implants into actual scientists and chemistry and stuff to figure out what exactly were those
things.
Let
me go down a side road here, okay? And this, I'll tell you right up front, this is self-serving. Self-serving for me. Okay?
Well, I hope it's a soft serve.
When I walked out of CRN and UFOs Tonight disappeared, they took a slump and a lot of people tuning in. So, Roger Lear, Dr. Roger Lear, and John Greenwald went down there and started doing or trying to do a UFO show similar to mine.
I remember this.
Didn't work out, did it?
So, do we have anybody on the phones? Anybody's on the phone.
well, Don, they might have had a bunch of people on the phone, but they might have just kept that same audio engineer that screwed your soundboard up, so they wouldn't know anyway.
Yeah. When Don
never thought of that. That's brilliant.
The thing that bugged me about the cyber stations, and I love the guy who did the behind the scenes stuff with you, who you're still in touch with him, but their equipment was so freaking horrible. You'd have these great shows and you're like, what's he saying? It was horrible, but the data was there, but you couldn't hear half of it, and you'd go in and out like the wind would blow it away. It would come back. Oh my God. I like that show, but I'm so glad you got on a better platform.
And I think technology really solved a lot of the problems on that show. Once the Bluetooth stuff started coming about and the microphone and technology became affordable and you didn't need the board. And I mean, I'm talking right now on whatever, I actually have a nice microphone. I probably should have hooked it up, but I think that there was that sort of in between phase where the technology for doing these sorts of streams and podcasting was just slightly out of reach for those types of people. And now it's like super ubiquitous and we all can afford it. So that's good. I mean, why it was like really bothering me, but the guest that we were mentioning earlier was Chris Lambright.
Okay.
Yes. And he's an interesting guy. He's another researcher that if I had some time, I would like to get to know, because he really has an interesting perspective, and he forged like very close relationships with a lot of the Benowitz and so forth. And I've always found his interviews to be interesting. He seems like a pretty middle of the road guy. He knew the Valdezes, and I think he has some interesting perspectives on the subject. And every time he's interviewed, and catch me if I'm wrong, sometimes I go to sleep and I just listen to the paranormal KGRA app, and whatever comes on, and I'll wake up in the middle of the night and who knows what I'm listening to. But I want to say that Lambright was on one of these roundtable shows, and Don, I think you were on it as well, if I recall. Does that ring a bell?
Well, that would have been UAP Crossfire.
Would have had to have been. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because I remember Martin Willis was on there and a few others.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's a great show. I really enjoy that. I like the format. I like the idea that.
We had a barn burner last.
You know what? I'm excited because that gives me something to listen to. I wish I listened to it before the show, but I'm familiar with your perspective on the subject, so I'd like to hear their reaction to it. Although I did notice when I went over to the KGRA site and I looked at the UAP Crossfire guest list, you had my good friend Michael Schratt on, and I was wondering if anyone had the audacity to ask him why he was such a staunch supporter of Dan Burrish all throughout the early 2000s, when it was well known that Bruce Knapp and others had fully discredited him by like 1996.
I'll be honest, Stephen, that completely slipped my mind.
Gosh, I'd love to.
I knew that at one point. Now that you mentioned.
Yeah, because my issue with him is he contends to be an aerospace, quote, historian, and certainly he's knowledgeable about aircraft. But when you want to use the word historian, that requires a level of research. And I think before you would jump into bed with somebody who's claiming to be the head of the Majestic 12, who lives in a small apartment in Las Vegas, you might want to just type his name into Google to be like, who is this guy I'm going to spend the next couple years with doing all of his 3D renderings and going on the speaking tour, talking about how Dr. Burrish gave me detailed blueprints of the underground facility where he met the J-Rod or whatever. Had he have simply Googled the guy in 2009 or 2010, he would have found the articles by George Knapp, and he would have found all the information that totally discredited the guy. I mean, the guy's certainly not serving under Dick Cheney in MJ-12, and then they put him in a little apartment. It's laughable. It's laughable. And the idea that someone can claim to be a historian or a serious researcher and could not.
Didn't his wife get nailed for bank fraud or something?
Well, he's got a few wives. His first wife was Deborah. I'm way too into this stuff sometimes. And he was like a lowly entry level probation officer. And so she was one of the people that would have to report to him because she was an addict and a thief and had some criminal issues, and he was the probation officer. Well, they ended up marrying, and he later wove her into the web of, well, she's actually a secret agent, and that criminal history was the background that they gave her. And then when they got divorced, his new wife, Marcy, supposedly was the real leader of the Majestic 12, and she had to, quote, do a black ops mission to kidnap Dr. Dan from Deborah, the ex-wife who was holding him captive. I mean, it's laughable. It's so hysterical.
And then he got in a shootout, didn't he?
He was the one that took out Gaddafi, and then he was trying to auction off the bullet. And it was like some bullet from like a gun that like Wyatt Earp would use, like some, revolver, like you're going to go out in the field in a modern military operation with this 6-shot thing from Tombstone. Like what is that gun? Nobody would ever use that.
I've got an analogy. Corey Good.
Oh, he's the worst too. I mean, at least that guy made some money off of it. I mean, give him credit. He was able to.
Hey, that's a great segue. Now, Don's not going to know about this, and Jerry isn't either. But, I kind of keep track of what Stephen does. Okay. Not in a weird way.
Gotcha.
So I noticed that you tend to sign on to YouTube and watch some of the live streams of a new younger guy who I actually think is doing good work, but the way he does it is interesting. Truth Seekers.
Yes.
Okay. So I do know, because he's really into they're making the UFO bucks and things. And, some are, but nobody really makes any money off of this.
Correct.
Regardless.
Yes.
I was wondering, and if nobody knows this guy, go to Truth Seekers on the YouTube. And I do think he does some good work because he calls people out big time, right? He does risk getting sued constantly if a person has the money to sue him. But I was wondering, in general, do you think I think he's good for the subject. And are there anybody else new that you know about who might be into the subject, who are doing good work, who are like under 30, like him?
Boy, that's a tough one. Well, first of all, I do occasionally tune into him because I really love the subject. One of the part, as much as I think the subject of UFOs and paranormal stuff is interesting and mind expanding, something that's equally fascinating to me are some of the charlatans and hoaxes that have been associated with this field for so long. So I like both sides of the issue, so to speak. And one of the things that, as you mentioned, Mark, that he looks at are a lot of the Corey Goods and the Wilcox, and he likes to, kind of keep track of their inconsistencies in their track record and some of the outlandish things they've said and how they've profited it. I like his material. I don't like the presentation. I think that would be my one critique. I think his shtick's a little old in the sense that he's got to sort of move off it occasionally. It feels a little repetitive. But I will say that, he did something really good on the Victor alien interview case.
Right.
I watched all of, and I thought that was a pretty good thing. Although he really bamboozled one of the people on the show, and in a way that I thought was like not fair. But it's a long story. But yeah, he's good. Now, anybody under 30 that I think is doing good work. The only person that I think was remotely interesting for a little bit was that guy Deep Prasad, the Indian guy who was sort of a physicist with a string theory background that sort of came onto the scene really hard for a hot minute and fizzled out. I think he this is such a common thing in this field. The guy's clearly bright. He runs a, thing in Silicon Valley, but he over embellished, I think, his educational credentials up beyond what they actually were. So I think he got some flack for that, but the guy's extremely bright, and I like to see somebody his age looking into this. And then there's another guy, looks very similar to him in substance and tone, that also is interested in this. He pretty much does a physics-based podcast. Another Indian academic, young, and they wanted to use him as the moderator for a Canadian symposium with Elizondo, and a lot of those guys rejected him as the moderator.
I wonder why.
Yeah, but I forget his name, but he's very good too. But outside of that, I mean, I would have said Mika Hanks, but he's probably my age now. He's certainly not in his 30s or under 30. So
Hey, Don, when it comes to the truth seeker, his name's Stephen Kimby, and I tracked him down and I called him because he did something on who I consider a friend of mine that I thought was a little rough. So I had to clue him in on what was actually going on in this guy's personal life. And I think I got through to him because he kind of let that go. But I got to tell you, what I like about him is Linda Moulton Howe was selling an image from a video game cover as a true image of an alien. And this guy, he does his research, and he reached out to her and said, look, here's the proof of where this comes from. And she fought him and fought him and fought him to not remove it. Then she finally removed it from the paywall and was giving it away still as a probable real photo for an alien. And without a guy like this, that stuff still floats out there. So that, I may not agree with all the stuff he does either, but it's so nice to see somebody full of vigor and energy. And he does these shows like 4 nights a week for 2-3 hours a night. Granted, it gets a little old, but not many guys are willing to put their ass on the line and call these guys out.
Well, I'll tell you what, from a first person perspective, I learned 35 years ago, okay, although it never really stuck, but I learned 35 years ago that it doesn't matter how many times you expose a bullshit artist, no matter how much proof you have, no matter if you burn them with their very own voice and words,
Cooper,
it doesn't stick.
Yep.
Okay. Yep. It's an exercise in futility.
MUFON
proved that to me back in the mid 90s. And some of these guys, they're like vampires.
Yeah.
Okay. You put them in the grave, and a week later, a month later, 6 months, they're back in action. Hey,
yeah, well, that's why it takes a younger guy
one
like
of the biggest guys in recent history, and Stephen, you'll recall this, was Philip in Brogno.
Yes.
Now, I knew in Brogno, going back to the 80s, okay, he was part of Bob Pratt and J. Allen Hynek's book, okay, on the Hudson Valley UFO.
Yes.
I gave that book high marks. And as a result, I met professionally. We never became buddies or friends, but I met in Brogno. And I never had a reason ever to doubt anything the guy said. Okay. And as it turned out, as time went on, okay, he got a little more out there and then out there. And he would run around wearing his MIT sweatshirt or t-shirt. And then he started billing himself as having a PhD. All right. Now,
Sean David Morton.
I basically had bumped heads with a guy on the Paracast, okay, a skeptic. I didn't know the guy, and obviously the guy didn't know who I was, but he knew I had a radio show. And I had mentioned an upcoming show that I was going to have on was Dr. John Brandenburg about a meteorite. This was during the Obama administration, a meteorite that had come down that had a liquid organic material in the meteorite from outer space. Okay. And Obama's White House science people were all over that. They did everything they could do to basically make this story disappear. Well, I had mentioned that from what I recall, that was going to be my guest. Well, this skeptic, his name was Lance Moody, immediately jumped all over Brandenburg. And he did something that today it's actually a hell of a lot easier to do than it was then, but he managed to do it then. He got me pissed off. And we went at it. And I let him know, I said, look, pal, who the hell are you, okay, to denigrate and discredit my guest before he's even on the GD show? Okay. Well, then he must did a little research and found out who I was. And he said, oh, gee, I'm sorry, Don. I didn't know who you were. And not that should make a damn, right? But anyway, this is the guy that initially went after Imbrogno. He wrote MIT to find out if Imbrogno basically had his PhD from there. They never heard of him. So who does he write? Okay, who does Moody write? He writes me. And he said, this is what I've discovered. What do you think I should do? What do I think you should do?
That's a good move, really. You're somebody of note. That's not a bad move.
And I said, look, I'll tell you this much. I said, I don't know anything about this except what you've sent me. And hey, in hindsight, the guy was right on the money. Okay, he was.
Right.
But I said, if you're going to accuse him of academic fraud, then this is what I suggest. You make sure all your T's are crossed, all your I's are dotted, because I have no doubt that he'll sue. And then something hit me. I had at that point, Imbrogno recently on my radio show. He had a new book that came out. Him and what the hell was his partner's writing? His writing partner's name?
Mary Ellen Guiley.
Yeah.
And the Gin.
Yes, the Gin. And on that show, he had mentioned, well, when I was in special forces in Vietnam, and suddenly that clicked. Wait a minute, okay. The guy is claiming to be a PhD. Was he special forces? Was this another bullshit story? So I started an investigation. I got in touch with some people in the United States Army Special Forces Association, and I was talking to them, and I said, this is what this guy alleges. He was SOG. Okay, now, SOG during the Vietnam War was an extraordinarily secret group of SF guys. Well, not only SF, they also had SEALs, and they had some pararescue from the Air Force involved and some other things. But Studies and Observation Group, okay, is what officially it was known as. And these were the guys that would illegally go into Laos, Cambodia, even North Vietnam, carrying out missions and operations. Elite goes beyond saying. These guys were elite. Very small community. They all knew each other. We never heard of this son of a bitch. Oh, okay. Now, in recent years, all the phony Navy SEALs that have been popping up everywhere. Well, this was another case of that. So I called Imbrogno up, and I said, look, Phil, I'm not a guy that'll stab you in the back. I'll stab you in the front while you're looking at me, but I'm not going to stab you in the back. This is what I'm doing. I'm doing an investigation on your claims you were special forces. If you got anything to tell me now. Okay. Well, he had nothing to say. Well, I wrote my report, okay, and then I put it out online. I mean, everybody read it that was interested in this, along with Lance Moody's exposure of his phony academic, and he disappeared. But later on, he popped back out.
Of course he did. Of course he did. Dr. Jonathan Reed will never go away.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
And what was interesting is when Imbrogno popped back up, his bio said that he was, quote, a science educator with 20 years of a much more sanitized background than a PhD from MIT. Because I think he did teach like the 7th or 8th grade or high school something, which was really a paid demotion for somebody with a PhD from a place like MIT to be teaching high school. I mean, wow. That almost begs the question right there. What did you do?
Oh, God. Yeah.
It's like these guys that claim, oh, I'm vet and I need money for a dog. If you're, you have the VA, so immediately your story doesn't jive. You see these guys, I was a Navy SEAL, but I can't afford to go down and get, whatever done. I'm like, what about the VA? Oh, well, I was too secret. It was, there's a guy, Don Shipley. He's a former Navy SEAL. And
I'm friends with Don.
He's his personality is very identical to Don's in a lot of ways. And what he doesn't like are these
Stephen,
fake
we
skills.
had him on.
He's great. Show. Yeah, and he goes after the Navy SEAL guys, especially, I think, because his son's a SEAL and he really values that trident, and he doesn't like people that profit from it, and he goes after them pretty hard. And I always get a chuckle out of the stuff he gives them. He always asks them a specific question, like something like, have you ever shot a Drago or a dragon or something like that? And these idiots will be like, oh yeah, I've shot those all the time. He's like, no, that's an underwater rebreather, you idiot. It's not a weapon, but he tells these supposed Navy SEALs, he's like, actually, that's like the most ubiquitous thing you would ever rely on as a SEAL. It's like, immediately what that is.
Well, he also has access to all the class records.
Yeah,
so
he does.
He immediately asks them, what Bud's class did you graduate?
And they never know. They're off by like 20 years.
Make up numbers, and it's just
he's great. I love that stuff. We need more people like that. Don was the one who still does it, but I mean, back when the field really needed somebody vetting people, that was Don and Vicky with UFO Magazine. I mean, they were really the precursors to what you're seeing with a lot of these people now. They were going after these guys like the the pilot that kept changing. Guy Kirkwood and Greer to some extent, and Burrish, and Bill Cooper. And there's a handful of people doing it now, but there's just so many alternate ways to get media that if you're in like the Corey Good camp, you're only listening to the Corey Good echo chamber, and you're certainly not going to be listening to Dark Matters Radio. So that's the sad part is as much information as we have, it's very compartmentalized, and everything is team based now. So they don't really listen to other people. I listen to all sides. I love to hear skeptics.
Gary, who's the guy you do the covers of the book for again? His name escapes me.
Dale Dye.
Dale. Now look, I'm not going to say the name. Okay, we all know this guy, but I'm not going to besmirch Don's show with his name. But I didn't know who to go to because this person was saying he was Secret Service, this, that, and the other thing, and Prague and all this horse shit. I went to Dale Dye, and you know what he did? He didn't know me from Adam. He looked into it for me, and he came back and he said, this guy's full of shit, and it doesn't exist, and you should walk from this guy. Dale Dye did that for me. So when you talk to him, you can tell him, hey, we off air, we can talk about the name, but he did that for me as a nobody, and he put some time in, asked his people, and said, this guy's full of shit. So we need more guys like that. They're busy. I get it, but it felt really good to talk to somebody who knew what the hell he was talking about, to do a couple of phone calls. That's all it took. It's like, no, of course not. It's all made up. It's horse shit. Dale Dye.
A friend of mine just contacted me, and he says, my future brother-in-law is saying some stuff. And I said, well, give me an order, everything he said. And he gave me a list of things. I said, look, you can call Don Shipley if you want to. I gave him his information. I said, but I'm telling you right now, your future brother-in-law is a fucking liar. He's never served a day in his fucking life, if that's what he told you. And it was an interesting conversation we had. He was giving me some crazy shit. Like the guy was saying that he had was a sniper. One thing, he says he was a sniper. And I said, what branch? He says he was in the Marine Corps. I said, so
the sniper branch.
Was he Marine Recon? Give me some more information. And so he starts going into it, and I'm like going, these two things don't go together in the Marine Corps. No, he's lying to you.
Anybody that talks that much about anything that sensitive is typically
exactly.
When you meet those types of individuals, the real ones, they're very tight-lipped unless they're in the company of other people in a similar capacity. They don't go telling their neighbors and brother-in-laws about their secret missions and how badass they are. You'll never see that. They're usually the most mild-mannered, modest people, especially at the special forces level. They really have a camaraderie, and they don't really want to share that with civilians, to be honest.
Yeah, because Dale doesn't talk about that stuff.
Civilians don't have any clue.
There you go.
It's like Don saw action. You think Don's just going to share that stuff on the air, or just? Of course not. Of course not. There's a number of no. It's too personal.
Yeah. It's like somebody asked Don, "You ever kill anybody?" He says, "Only people who ask really overly personal questions."
Exactly. And I just wanted to say before the show's over, the other young researcher his name is Kurt Jamungal, Jaimungal. He's a really smart guy. He talks a lot about physics and morality and God and technology, but he sort of caught the UFO bug when everyone else did in 2017. So he's interviewed all the typical players, the Chris Mellons and the Elizondos, and believe it or not, he's taken a big step back because he's like, some of these people are so hard to pin down, and they're so shadowy, and they won't give me a direct answer, and it seems like it's a lot of smoke and mirrors. So like he was very frustrated with it as somebody trying to just figure it out. He just wasn't happy with the Mellons and the Elizondos. He's been quite critical of them, actually. Because he comes from an academic, he wants to know, well, you're making these claims. Like, when are we going to see the high fidelity pictures you keep talking about, Lou? Oh, well, we're working on getting them out. Okay.
Well, I released one. It was called the Jellyfish. Okay.
Oh, those are balloons.
Oh, and that horse's ass, the guy that your old buddy is teamed up with the long fucking beard.
Corbell, yeah, he's just a fanboy.
I tried to watch this fucking documentary where he interviewed the guy who claimed to have worked on the UFO at Area 51. Bob Lazar. And I believe about 50% of what he talks about. But he made this documentary about him. And really, it seemed to be more about himself.
It was a fan piece about himself, and that was one of the things when we're bringing it back to filmmaker that I certainly you will not. I think I'm in the documentary for one frame where you can see my back.
Yeah, it's not about you.
Well, a good documentarian doesn't insert themselves into the story.
He put himself right in the middle, and he made that thing like an art piece. That was such an abstract, weird documentary, and what a great opportunity to bring that story to the masses in a mainstream way. And it was just so awful. So awful.
Well, gang, we're under a half a minute to the end of the show. And Stephen, as always, buddy,
he's given us 3 minutes.
Brighten up the landscape. Thank you so much.
I'm trying. I'd love to come back anytime anything breaks in this subject. Let's get after it and talk about it. I'm interested in coming on the Crossfire too. I'd like to do that one time.
Yeah.
Love to have you.
All right.
I'd like to see some more docs from you, dude.
I'm on it, man. I'm working on a few that are interesting. Hit me up on Facebook after this. I'll send you some of the things I'm working on currently.
Okay, that's it tonight, ladies and gentlemen. We've got to go. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chanel, for another stellar job. And thank you, KGRAdb. We'll see you on Thursday, UAP Crossfire. That's it. Good night.
God bless you.